guys, it's Jessica. Did you enjoy Ruby Dixon's Ice Planet Barbarians? If so, this is a video for you because I'm about to recommend 6 other alien series that are similar to it for you to enjoy as a nice breezy summer read. So what's my criteria to make these reads like Ice Planet Barbarians? First is going to be the human alien abduction factor. There needs to be some kind of kidnapping abduction situation and they need to be unable to get home. Does this series have an overarching plot? In Ice Planet Barbarians, one of the things I loved is when you went from one book to the next, there were like little things that were happening in the background, sometimes big things, and it would drive an overall story. Also, we care about world building. I want worlds that feel real and different than ours. Also, we want that cultural clash, cultural misunderstandings element that you can get in an Ice Planet Barbarian series. Human standards on how they date, how they have relationships, how they eventually get married are very different than the blue aliens. And lastly, we're looking for that monster romance factor. So within the fantasy sci-fi genre, monster romance is specifically a subcategory. Usually on the science fiction side, I'm calling the aliens the monsters. It started to gain some mainstream popularity. Certainly we saw it in movies like In the Shape of Water. But recently in the past year, maybe year and a half, it's become really popular on like the BookTube, BookTok, Bookstagram, social media influencer scene. And I think Ice Planet Barbarians is a pretty good introduction to monster romance. But at its core, monster romance is about humanizing a non-human sentient creature. It's about choosing commonalities instead of differences, and it's about recognizing that what we have in common is more important than the things that are different. And of course, because it's a romance, the protagonist usually comes to love the monster, either because of or despite what makes them not human. Alright, so now that we've got the rubric down, let's go into the series. The first series will be The Prime Mating Agency by Regine Abel. I talked about this series a lot, almost as much as I discussed Ice Planet Barbarians last year. The timing of when I read Ice Planet Barbarians and when the Prime Mating Agency release made it inevitable that I'd read them back to back and that a lot of their commonalities would stand out. A basic summary for the Prime Mating Agency is each book is standalone. They live in a world where technology has advanced a lot. Humans have started terraforming other planets and they're in constant communication with other sentient races. It seems like there might be an overarching government federation kind of thing going on. But because people are so far spread out, a lot of times they sort of have trouble finding a good match for them on the planet or a good living situation for them on the planet they're born. And they go to this Prime Mating Agency that's run by a bunch of telepathic birdmen to get set up with someone else in the galaxy. The telepathy of this bird species lets them guarantee a good match between both parties. So that's sort of like the draw. If you're unhappy in your life, you're looking for love, you're not finding it around you, you go to these birdmen, you can see right away that it's pretty low stakes. On our rubric with the human to alien abduction, I can honestly say that is not there. If we want to talk about overarching plot, each of the Prime Mating series books is a standalone right now. On the world building checklist, I do feel like each of the 3 worlds that I've been to in this series feel very fleshed out, they feel detailed. Their culture, society, landscape, it all makes sense, is an interesting read, and is unique enough that I remember them later. Even in like I Married the Lizard Man, we sort of get a look at 2 different worlds and cultures, and I can tell you about both the original girl's world and the Lizard Man's world. And I Married the Naga. The Naga world is beautiful and very interesting, and there's a huge focus on it. There's even a larger focus on how the Naga race there interacts with their land and how they want other people moving forward to interact on their planet. I Married a Birdman has the most history as far as the different cultures go, but their geography is the weakest. Overall, they're all pretty interesting reads. The cultures, the lands, they feel real and immersive, and you can kind of just enjoy the idea that space exists and there's other planets that can sustain life and do it in different, vibrant, interesting ways. These books rarely have any plot, so everything is about the 2 different cultures meeting, discussing with each other, and coming to workarounds, conclusions, compromises, and sometimes creating new cultural traditions. And as far as the monster romance element, I'd probably give this like an 8 or a 9. There's some great healthy conversations regarding intimacy in these books. There's also wonderful conversations about cultural expectations between the 2. And in the Prime Mating Agency, you usually get the perspective of the woman and the perspective of the monster. And both of them, when they meet each other for the first time, don't usually find the other person attractive. They find them strange or odd or disturbing in different ways, and they have to slowly get used to those differences and oddities. But that, combined with like physically they're different enough that they move in different ways, or they have different kinds of sleep cycles or eating cycles, these are all things that they have to talk about, come to terms with, and figure out where to go moving forward. And I really enjoyed that monstery element. Next is going to be the Clan series by Victoria Aveline. Number 1 is Choosing Theo. This story starts us off with a woman who's been abducted. The spaceship she's on crash lands and she struggles to find help. She is in a far more advanced civilization than hers. They find out that she is from a planet that didn't know other sentient life exists, and because of their laws they can't go to that planet to return her. So they have to integrate her into their current society. Their policy on this is for the new species to get married to one of their locals for a year. The spouse will take care of them, feed them, and help them acclimate culturally and technologically to their society. Right away, you can see that the human alien abduction can't return home element is there. Honestly, I don't know if there's an overarching plot. I only read book 1. The whole point of the arranged marriage is because there are a lot of cultural differences between the Earthlings and this other race. So she's going to learn a bunch of different technology and a whole different way to view marriage and relationships. As far as actual world building goes, it's kind of hit and miss. I felt like I didn't have a really strong sense of the world. I had a good idea of some of the technologies and some of the different places on this planet, and I had a pretty good idea about the governing system. But also it felt like there were convenient holes in this build so that we could have antagonism going forward. As far as the monster romance element goes, these particular aliens are very human looking. So even though they act different and have different standards, I don't think there's a physical or non-human element that we could really apply here. I don't even think the society they're living in is so far off or so far removed from what humans would do if they were more technologically advanced and part of a larger governing system that were trying to protect less advanced species. Overall, I'd say this book is probably more like Ice Planet Barbarians than some of the others on this list, but it's like a weaker version in my view. It's worth it if you want a quick read or if you want to see someone else's slightly different take on the same kind of general tropes. I wouldn't expect it to meet or exceed your experience reading Ice Planet Barbarians. Next is going to be Stolen by the Alien series by Amanda Milo. Book 1 is Stolen by the Alien. As you might expect in this series, a bunch of human women have been stolen from Earth. This is another situation where Earth doesn't know about sentient life. This particular book series has a lot of triggers in it, and I would definitely look up a trigger warning before reading or going further. I know we often talk about in Ice Planet Barbarians that one iffy scene that got removed in the reprint that was assault, but this series has a lot of things going on. So you definitely want to go ahead and look at a couple trigger warning reviews before getting further in this series. And if you found that particular element of the Ice Planet Barbarians particularly dark, then this series is a skip. The main character and many other women are abducted by aliens. They're going to be put up as auctioned off to slaves. And there's this hulky big alien who's passing by. He sees our protagonist, mistakes her for another alien race that his race protects, and he intervenes, saves her from the auction house, and the two of them are kind of on the run for a while. The book itself takes a drastic left turn when he is finally able to reunite her with the alien race she's supposedly part of, and it becomes clear that she is a human, which is entirely separate from this other group of people. Long story short, this story ends up setting up a commune for all the Earth women so they and their mates can be studied by this other alien race that they were mistaken for. So point number 1, alien abduction, check. Can't return to Earth, half a check. For various reasons, some of these human women can't or will not be returned to Earth. In this particular series, there's no larger federation or group that's stopping these other alien races from flying them back to their home and letting them go. They just often choose not to. And that's another element of this book that starts to make things muddy or ambiguous, because a lot of times like the love interest or the mate or whoever is making those decisions for the human. So another element that I would definitely read at your own discretion on. As far as world building goes, when you get to the commune and they start setting up the different rooms and having different social interactions with a whole bunch of different aliens and the human girls and stuff, that's really fun and believable and enjoyable. And certain elements of the other alien society make sense, and other elements are kept like intentionally vague so that we can just know that it's harsh and it's brutal and awful things are allowed in this galaxy. The cultural difference element in this series is vast, in part because we're dealing with a lot of different alien species and they all have different standards. That's pretty interesting to me, actually. And the other thing that was interesting is the other alien races kind of know each other's cultures and standards. They have stereotypes already pre-built in, but they also sort of know how to navigate those cultures and standards. And it's like the humans that are kind of trialing and erroring it and trying to figure out as they go along. So I kind of liked all of that. The monster romance factor on this is like 11 out of 10. It's so much monster all the time. It's probably not the case for everyone, maybe not even for most people in this genre, but I was reading some of the affectionate scenes, just like how the aliens showed affection to the humans, and it was weird. It was obvious that the human was accepting of this affection and had even come to a place in their life where they appreciated the sentiment or maybe like enjoyed elements of how this alien was showing affection for X, Y, and Z reason. But as like an outsider person, even with the first person perspective,
it was like, this is odd. And the fact that you've accepted it is odd.
This is a case of pretty good writing, though, I think. I understood why the protagonists felt the way they did, and I could accept that emotionally or physically or whatever they were feeling and thinking these kinds of things about it, even as I was like,
I think I might be uncomfortable by this, or I think this is too out there for me.
If you can deal with like some darker, grimmer things, some moral ambiguity, then this is a really interesting series. And Amanda Milo has a ton of alien series. Next is going to be the R series by S.M. Matthews. Book number 1 is called Our Pet. So a couple things about this series. The humans are abducted and originally sold to a separate alien race as pets. It becomes obvious almost from the moment the humans wake up that they are highly sentient and are not a pet class species. So this is not a series where the humans are treated like pets, even though the title is Our Pet. They're immediately treated like a first contact sentient species once they wake up in the care of these new people. Figuring out their language, teaching them the other person's language, respecting boundaries, that kind of thing. So I just want to make that clear in the outset because the title says something different than the actual material. It's a reverse harem series. The aliens that buy the humans are cat people. They're born with 3 brothers, 1 sister. The 3 brothers end up living, working together, and eventually mating one future mate altogether. And the sister, I don't know, she's just super awesome and gets to live an amazing life, apparently, with this species. The R series does have a human alien abduction. In this case, the humans can't go back because the cat people don't know where Earth is, and the humans have no way of identifying it. There is an overarching plot in this series, and you do get to see past love interests come back in and feature. And I really enjoyed that. It was very Ice Planet Barbarians in that way, and because I really liked each of the female characters, I just loved getting to see them again. I loved when the humans got to get together. All of that was a lot of fun. World building wise, it's a little bit hit and miss for me. One thing about this series is it mostly takes place on a space station or a spaceship. There's a little bit on world time, but it's mostly in different space locales. And I like this because we get a lot of scenes of the stars, a lot of like spaceship movement, and like there's a certain like technical, mechanical feel that comes with these. But because of that, we don't get like a lot of those environmental scenes or scenes on the planet that sort of like ground it and make their culture, lifestyle all blend together with the world they grew up on. Obviously, culturally, there's a big difference considering all three brothers take one mate. The whole cat person society is very different than ours. The cat people are significantly more trusting. They have a matriarchal society. So all that's kind of interesting to see play out, especially when you start to realize that there is a lot of nuance and subtle elements that they think their society is one way. And they come to find out that it's another way, partially from shifting how they view things. And it's possible there's like a larger plot going on between the cat people species and the species that abducted the humans, and even maybe like a hidden history between the cat people and the humans that we just don't know about. The series kind of ends ambiguously, so it is hard to say how that would further develop if S.M. Matthews ever continued the series. With the R series, unlike Ice Planet Barbarians, there is some culpability with the cat people. I know in the beginning I explained why the cat people can't return the humans home, but there are several cat people that help this alien species set up and sell these human women to their own people. And when they do that, they know that the humans are sentient and they still sell them as pets. And there's not like ever a coming to terms with that or facing that. Also, the process to get humans recognized as a sentient species and what class of sentience they are, that process is pretty dehumanizing, insensitive, I guess would be a better term. And there's a political agenda involved, and we don't really address or have any comeuppance for that either. So there's quite a few morally ambiguous or immoral things happening, and it's not addressed in the text. In fact, sometimes it's like justified by the text as them secretly doing something that was good, and I don't stand for that. Definitely read at your discretion if you don't like that kind of thing. I'd say the monster romance factor is probably like an 8, 8.5. They are cat people, so that's very different visually than humans. Their standards of beauty are pretty well outlined, and how humans perceive the cat people as beautiful versus how cat people view themselves is explored in a way that's interesting and dynamic. The only reason it's not like a higher rating is because we do see like a lot of cartoon cat people in our media and literature. So I think to a certain degree, certain kinds of humanoid animals are just like standard in our society. So we don't find it as odd as we would some other kinds of animals. Overall, the books in the R's series are pretty short, quick reads, and it's an easy way to pass like a couple days in the summer. Next is going to be the Monsters Love Curvy Girl series by Michel Mills. Book number 1 is His Human Nanny. The series is a little bit of an outlier for me. It's not the kind of thing I would read, but Mar from Books Like Whoa recommended it as something similar to Ice Planet Barbarians, and it was at a time when I was really looking for some more Ice Planet Barbarian magic, so I checked it out. The basic premise of this series is that aliens have made contact with humans and set up temp agencies on planet that send them off to different areas of the galaxy to do jobs. This particular woman is a caretaker, usually for the elderly, but she gets called in to do this nanny job as like a last gig for her before she gets to leave the agency. And she gets there and kind of falls in love with the kid and the dad and his family, and things develop from there. So this is a book that doesn't have a human alien abduction. I don't know if there's an overarching plot in the series. I only read this book. It's a very cinnamon rolly, sweet, kind of sappy, lovey-dovey book, and I could see really liking it as like a fun romp if I were in the mood for it. But if you're not in the mood for just like fluffy relationship times, the series is not for you. I both did and didn't like the world building in this series. They do some world building on where Earth is now, the predatory nature of some of these temp agencies and the contracts and moving to New Earth and all that kind of stuff that was very interesting and detailed, and I liked a lot. But the majority of the book happens on this alien planet. That's world building is sort of confusing to me. Like, I don't understand why this species is living the way they're living. I don't really understand a lot about their society as a whole. I don't understand why they look so different from humans, but are like living in the same kind of housing that we live in, using the same kind of like refrigerator units and stuff, eating basically the same kind of food we're eating. They have parks and strollers. It just felt to me like the differences in the society were strictly that the alien visually looked different, but otherwise they're pretty human. And coming off of a bunch of other books where the physical differences correlated to a cultural difference, and correlated to different kinds of living situations and circumstances. It was just very jarring and took me out of the story. And as you could surmise from that, there's not really a lot of cultural differences. The biggest difference that I recognized is that the nanny is from like a struggling lower class and this alien guy is super rich. And it's an economic class difference, but it's not really a cultural or species difference. In the monster romance factor, even though the alien is visually very different and we get a description of that early on, because he acts so human and he has such like a normal human house and human job and human relationships, I like quickly forgot what he looked like. So I'm gonna give this like a 1 or 2 in the monster romance category, just because there wasn't any visual differences or really like huge different standards of beauty. The biggest standard of beauty, as you might guess from a Monsters Love Curvy Girls series, is that the nanny is a little bit more curvy, and that's something that this monster values and thinks is highly attractive. I don't know if it's more affirming that curvy girls are finding love with monsters, or if it's sad that we're this far into the future and it's still such a big turn off to people. Either way, for me, this series wasn't giving me what I love about Ice Planet Barbarians, but I could see why some people who liked one would enjoy the other. And the last book I want to talk about is actually a standalone called Planet Zero by Lydia Hope. It existed before the Shinedown song, and the two are not related. Basically, the premise of this is Addie was traveling to a colony in a spaceship, and they came close to this planet Zero. It caused a crash in their ship, and she ends up being the sole survivor. This was like a fascinating, wonderful read. It's a lot less romance and a lot more horror survival, in my opinion, and there's a lot stronger sci-fi elements in this story than there are in most of the others. But I just think this is like an excellent, really interesting read if you're looking for some of that more sci-fi survival kind of thing. So for like the alien abduction / can't return home, she wasn't stolen by these aliens. She did go out into space intentionally, but since she can't go home and she's taken from everything she knows and there's no way for her to communicate, we're going to give that a check. Obviously, this is a standalone book, so it doesn't have an overarching plot, but the way the story is told, there's kind of like check-ins with people in the past or like connections that happen. Addie has interacted with some people, then she moves and meets these other alien people, and they're like, oh, I know so-and-so. And we start to get like some flashes about why so-and-so was acting the way they were when Addie met them. And in that way, it's interesting because at first you just see like this behavior. You're not really sure about the how or the why or how this plays into their society. And then you get the follow-up on it. I think the world building in this is excellent. I got a very strong sense of place. I got a strong sense of the alien society. It was super different and really rubbed up against Addie the wrong way because she is a medic. And in the society that she finds herself in, they don't believe in medication, healing, or helping each other with wounds. You should be good enough that you don't get hurt. And if you are hurt, you're either left for dead or you figure it out on your own. It's kind of like an embarrassment that you're hurt, and you almost sort of have to hide it from the rest of the group. From our human perspective, of course, this is like ridiculous and doesn't make a lot of sense. But both the other creatures on this planet, some of the flora on this planet, and the general conditions are all so harsh. I think the society itself, even though they care about each other, they had to sort of harden, because if you went to help someone who is in danger, you are more likely to die than you were to actually help them. And while talking about the world building, I think I discussed the main cultural miscommunication. And Addie does get to see some of the times when there's nothing you can do but run, when standing your ground or helping is just not going to work on this planet. But she also is able to provide times where reaching out compassionately do save that person's life and they make full recoveries. She is even able to see some value in some of the more disabled members of the tribe that are sort of like surviving like outside pariahs. And for the monster romance factor, I don't really know. I can't even remember the description of the aliens. I was so caught up in the environment environment, the flora, the fauna, the struggle against the environment. I think they were pretty humanoid. I think they were bigger than humans were, but they didn't have like extra arms. Maybe they had a tail, I don't remember. So I'm gonna give it like a 4 or a 5 on a scale of 10. Their attitude is so different than our modern human understanding of medicine and teamwork that they feel very foreign. So that's gonna be a couple of different series to check out if you liked Ice Planet Barbarians. Have you read any of these book series or standalone books? Let me know in those comments down below. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, keep reading. Bye!